As much as I love horror and Star Wars, not all great things go well together, and sometimes the past should remain buried. The Star Wars universe already has enough environmental hazards and monstrous entities that can end you quicker than Gina Carano ended her career. Zombies never needed to be added to the mix. That's right, in this video we'll be discussing a nightmare from Legends that will hopefully never see the light of day in Disney's canon. A virus that goes by many names: the Sickness, Imperial Bioweapons Project I-71A, and Project Blackwing. Regardless of what you call it, this virus makes the traditional zombie viruses look like the common cold. Its origins are about as terrible as one can imagine, as it isn't even produced through normal scientific means, but through the power of Sith alchemy, as far back as 4645 BBY by the Sith Lord Darth Dreer on Odoacer Fausten. I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but Fausten comes pretty close to Faust, which is an old German legend where a man exchanges his soul to the devil for great knowledge and power, only for it to be his downfall. Not much different from this tale. There were several different ingredients that were used during the experiment, the most important one being a Murakami black orchid. For anyone unfamiliar, these plants are fully self-aware and extremely force-sensitive as well, able to use telepathy and communicate with other force-sensitives. You can already see where this is going, but it's not even the worst part. In order for the synthesis to be successful, a living host had to be used as the incubator, producing the intended liquid after sloshing around in the host body. It was originally created with the hopes of granting Dreer with immortality, but his initial experiment resulted in failure and ultimately consumed him, but not before he transcribed all of his findings into a Sith holocron. Jump forward about 1,000 years later, and we have Sith Lord Darth Scabros, who attempted to recreate Dreer's experiments, thinking that he could succeed where his predecessor failed. To no one's surprise, other than Scabros himself, this also resulted in failure. But this time, he unintentionally took everyone down with him, as the virus consumed the Odoacer Fausten Sith Academy. Fast forward once more, another 3,000 years, and we have Darth Vader, who learns about the sickness and orders the Imperial Biological Weapons Division to weaponize the virus. Rather than continue to attempt to unlock the secrets of immortality, he wanted it to be used to wipe out any rebels, along with anyone else that would dare oppose the Galactic Empire. This is where the sickness gained the name Imperial Bioweapons Project I-71A, but was later codenamed Project Blackwing or Blackwing Virus. These experiments were conducted upon the Imperial Star Destroyer Vector, as it traveled throughout the Outer Rim, Wild Space, and unknown regions. Only key personnel and those directly involved with the project were aware of what they were doing, while everyone else in the vessel was left out of the loop. Using 2 human hosts, the virus was perfected, and even had the capability of becoming an airborne pathogen. This went over about as well as you'd expect, as even with the very specialized container that was created to store the liquid version of the virus, there was still an outbreak on the Vector after some stormtroopers mishandled the cargo, resulting in multiple leaks. Although these leaks and affected personnel were quickly quarantined and studied, the declining state of the Vector resulted in periodic engine and power failures, making containment increasingly difficult. During this time, Imperial scientists discovered that some affected individuals were immune to the virus through sheer genetic luck. They were able to create antivirus from the blood of these individuals, however, the before-mentioned operational struggles and lack of resources kept enough of the serum to be created to save the entire crew of the Star Destroyer. The inevitable eventually came to pass, and the ship became overrun with infected, with those that were immune trying their best to defend the rest of the survivors. To truly highlight how horrifying this virus was, some survivors managed to board a Sentinel-class landing craft, Freebird, and tried to escape. To their horror, the infected figured out how to control and operate the Vector, and activated the tractor beam, pulling the ship back into the Star Destroyer. Although the infected were unable to breach the vessel, the survivors were trapped in there for 10 weeks, resorting to cannibalism to survive, with a crew of 30 dropping down to 7. This is where the fun begins. During those 10 weeks, the Vector drifted through the unknown regions, capturing any ships that came a little too close, including the Imperial prison barge, Purge. Unfortunately for the crew of the Purge, the tractor beam from the Star Destroyer ended up damaging its engines, rendering any attempt of escape useless. Sadly, the crew saw the Vector as a savior, and exited the ship to acquire supplies and parts to repair the barge. By this time, however, the virus had become airborne, and the 2 squads that were sent out on a fetch quest brought the infection back with them, or at least the ones that weren't killed off by the infected that still lingered throughout the Vector. Seeing as how there was no report of an outbreak, or any other kind of known illness on the Star Destroyer, the higher-ups of the Purge brushed it off as food poisoning from the barge's subpar mess hall, and had them report to the medbay. It was here that Dr. Zahara Cody and her 2-1B surgical droid named Waste were able to identify that it was a viral infection, although they were unable to figure out what kind or the source. As the virus spread, Dr. Cody realized that she was immune and worked with Waste to create an antivirus from her blood. By this time though, nearly the entire ship was infected, dead or undead. Dr. Cody was only able to save 2 inmates. Han Solo and Chewbacca. That's right, our two favorite smugglers were among the incarcerated that were aboard the Purge, but it was their solitary confinement that saved Han and Chewbacca, as the airflow into their cells was apparently different than the rest of the Purge, keeping the airborne virus from getting to them, along with any zombies that would try to do them harm. Dr. Cody, Han, Chewbacca, and two other survivors are able to board the Freebird and escape, only to see other docked ships also taking off, piloted by the undead. Thankfully, the undead need to be provided with continuous exposure to the virus, and become dormant, before getting the chance to jump to hyperspace, showcasing at least one limitation of this version of the virus. Because the story can't have too many happy endings, the Blackwing virus did manage to spread to Dathomir, likely due to one of the undead piloted ships entering the planet's orbit and crash landing. As the virus spread, even infecting a Rancor, the Galactic Empire discovered the outbreak and wiped out nearly all of the Howling Crag clan that lived close to the original site of infection. Only 3 Dathomiri witches were able to slow down the progression of the virus in themselves through the use of magic, but even they eventually succumbed to it, only to later be killed by a spacer sent by a force ghost of their clan mother, Amaya Chimeri. Now that you know the history of this nightmare, it's time to dive into why this virus was worse than any kind of zombie infection you could think of. Seriously, the Blackwing virus is what would happen if the Return of the Living Dead zombie virus and the Rage virus from 28 Days Later shacked up together and later had Rosemary's Baby. Although the first version of the sickness affected mostly humans, later versions, especially the one created by the Imperial Bioweapons Division, were able to spread through many other humanoid species, including Trandoshans, Twi'leks, Wookiees, and Zabrak. It could even spread to plant and animal life, like the Neti and the before-mentioned Rancor. Even the long dead were not safe from the infection. Its transmission rate was nearly 100%, with the exception of those that were immune to it. The easiest way for the virus to spread is to be bitten by an infected. The virus, however, could also be contracted through exposure to bodily fluids from an infected through open wounds, mucous membrane, or any available orifices. The Blackwing variant is thankfully the only version of the virus that was capable of becoming airborne. The fastest, most destructive method is a bite, but the most common shared reaction to infection is necrosis, especially around a bite, vision impairment, labored breathing, and eventual death. Some have stated that they experienced extreme hallucinations, or even vividly reproduced emotional memories. Madness is also fairly common among all forms of transmission. Those that have become infected by the airborne version of the virus had much longer periods of incubation and symptoms than the versions before it. It could easily be confused with the common cold or flu at first, before evolving into gastrointestinal issues, then internal bleeding, seizures, vomiting, and cardiac arrest. The Blackwing virus specifically had a really messed up effect on Wookiees and Rodians. With Wookiees, their tongues would swell up and suffocate them, while they would bloat to the point of rupture. Rodians would violently vomit to the point of throwing up their own internal organs. Those that die, or were already dead, are reanimated by the virus, becoming mindless puppets to its will. They would seek out the living in order to feed, kill, and spread. Thankfully, most infected suffer from heavy muscular and flesh decay, so they shambled or burst into half-runs at best. The downside is that the infected individuals were extremely durable, able to continue even after sustaining considerable damage and dismemberment. The scariest part of the virus, beyond what was already mentioned, is that it has a level of self-awareness and will of its own. It acts much like a hive mind thanks to the Murakami orchid used to produce it. It would even lie dormant within a being until it built up enough strength to overcome the host's immune system at the most opportune time. The virus allowed infected to even learn and adapt, sharing information with the rest of the hive mind. This is how they started out as mere shamblers to being able to operate spacecrafts and blasters. There are also instances before death that an infected individual has heard the voice of the virus, mimicking the Force or even trying to reason with them. The airborne version is the only variant of the virus that seems to have a limitation, as to where if an infected is not constantly exposed to the contaminated atmosphere of the virus, it will cause their body to shut down and enter a dormant state. There are few known forms of treatment and prevention, the first being mystical and never proven, involving the consumption of the still beating heart of a Jedi with a high midichlorian count after being cut out with a Sith sword. Another method is to be genetically resistant to the virus to begin with, or being injected with the antivirus. Other standard methods of fighting infections, such as medical treatments, blood transfusions, and amputation of infected limbs, can help slow the process, but not stop it. So, there you have it. Zombies in Star Wars. I love the expanded universe/legends, but the Blackwing virus can stay there. That universe should consider itself lucky that the virus never got a chance to truly spread, as I doubt it could be stopped, at least easily, once the infection rate became high enough. With how easily it can spread, how it allows infected to learn and adapt, and how difficult it is to contain, the only real option is to glass an infected planet. It's the only way to be sure. What are your thoughts on the Blackwing virus? Think you have a chance of surviving an outbreak? How would you try to contain it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Also, be sure to check out other lore and videos on this channel. A great way to support us is to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You can follow me and Ready Comics Roll on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all other social media listed in the video description below. Follow us on Twitch as we do random live streams throughout the week. You can help our channel grow by heading over to our Patreon page and becoming a supporter today. I'm Anthony, and as always, may the Force be with you.